Blessings, BookTube. I want to talk to you today about a very special author, a Nobel Prize winner, but in this case, a winner of the Nobel Prize for Peace. I have read a few of the Peace Prize winners' books, not enough to do a series on, so I'm going to throw this in with my series on the Nobel Lit winners, because I have wanted to talk about Dr. Albert Schweitzer for a long time. And I recently did a mock self-help video, and it got me thinking about, what could I actually recommend people in terms of self-help. I can only tell you that for myself personally, Dr. Albert Schweitzer has been, and not just for me, for a lot of incredible thinkers and doers of the past century, Schweitzer was a huge inspiration. I understand that some of you will be blocked from being able to take him as an inspiration due to his old white guy status, but I hope that you think hard about that. This is a perfect case to really examine that stance and whether it ought to apply in all cases. And I hope you'll find some things here worthy of emulation. I'm sure he had his faults, like everyone, but there's just so much really to praise here. And by the way, when people asked Schweitzer what they should do with their lives, and they would often come to him and ask, he would always tell them to build their own Lamborghini. Lamborghini is the African hospital that he built that won him the Nobel Prize, that he built twice. He would always tell them to build their own Lamborghini, to find your own way to make your mark. Let me tell you why I think that Schweitzer's life can give us some good goalposts to aim at, even if we're not as incredibly gifted, brilliant, and energetic as the man, and courageous. But we lesser humans, we can still aim for certain things. So the thing to know about Schweitzer was his historical situation is important. He was born in Alsace. Alsace, as you may recall from high school history, went back and forth between France and Germany in the world wars. They would fight over it. So it's a region of France today, that has a lot of German influence. And Schweitzer indeed writes and is fluent in German and French. He was a Lutheran. He was very religious, but he was difficult for some types of Christian thinkers in that he was very interested in the historical Christ. He was really one of the first people to write. He wrote a book about the historical Christ. There's a great booktuber who's done some series, a few videos on that I'll put in the notes if I remember. And because of his views on the historical Christ, he was actually forbidden from proselytizing when he eventually ended up in Africa. So he is incorrect to call him a missionary, as some people sometimes do. He was not a missionary to Gabon, where he ended up going in Africa, because he was forbidden from proselytizing, which makes it hard to be a missionary, right? Although that's being a bit facetious. Obviously, missionaries do, even today, great medical work and all sorts of other things than proselytizing. So, but he was sent by the mission board, but forbidden to proselytize. So you can call him a missionary, I guess, if you want, but he was a medical missionary. Now, he did not study medicine. He studied philosophy, theology, music. He wrote, still to this day, the book on Bach. His works on Bach are still studied and appreciated. He was an amazing organist. He could build organs and repair them. And in fact, he would finance the hospitals by giving organ concerts and talks, but mainly giving organ concerts around Europe. And that's how he would get the money to finance his work in Africa, which was always lacking funds. So he got to be very well known. I mean, he had a very successful life as a thinker, philosopher. He wrote about Western civilization. He wrote tons of books. He was, a top professor, well-known thinker in his fields. By the time he was 30. And he just had a feeling that he had to serve. And so he decided that at age 30, he was going to give his life to service. So this is one of his really amazing philosophies. So he decided to give his life to service. And somehow I can't remember all the details of how he became pointed towards medical work in Africa, but that at some point became his focus of how he might serve. And so he went to medical school. He started all over, and he didn't get any special treatment either. He was, he was thrown in with the other medical students. And so, for most of us to be a top professor in our field would already be a dream and a life of success, and then to be a doctor is like a whole other, and he did both. And then off he went, and it wasn't, it's not like he went off like, oh, I'll become famous, I'll win a Nobel Prize for Peace. I mean, he went to bury himself in Gabon, in Central Africa. You couldn't even reach Lamborghini. You had to take boats up there. I mean, there was no communications. He was going to be lost to the Western world, and just doing his work in an obscure corner of Africa, obscure to Westerners. So he goes to Gabon. He builds us. First of all, he has to build a hospital. Builds one of the first leper hospitals as well, by the way. And there's all sorts of details about, ways in which he accommodated or didn't accommodate, African norms and mores in the operating of that hospital. Obviously, he was using Western medicine, so he didn't always have much good to say about native medicine. But in other ways, he would do, like the way he fed people by family and stuff, he would make concessions to the norms of African society in which he was. Well, it was a multi-ethnic society, but there was a lot of fear of poisoning. That was a big deal. So anyway, getting people fed was a whole thing, and he had to really accommodate the people how they wanted to do it. And he trained up native folks in Western medicine as well as constantly recruiting doctors and nurses and other people from abroad. When he became famous, everyone wanted to go volunteer at his hospital, right, in Lamborghini. But, in the beginning, it was tough. He did everything himself. Now, you think all this is amazing enough, right? Get this. He is the guy on whom Dr. Dolittle is based. Okay, Dr. Dolittle, not Eddie Murphy, the original guy with the push me, pull me llama, the loves the animals. He had such a profound love of animals. So he's not only like treating the people, he's treating the animals. He once said still he brought his organ over, still playing his organ. He once said the most beautiful music he ever heard was when a child's cries of pain turn into sighs or laughter or something like that. Beautiful man. He had this vision when he was going up the river of this new philosophy that took over his whole life called reverence for life. That all life was precious. Everybody wants to live and be free of pain. And so that's the book. I've read Primeval Forest, Out of My Life and Thought, and some of the historical Jesus stuff, not the Bach. I've read a bunch of his books, but I thought I would do Reverence for Life because it's really his philosophy that inspired a lot of people. Okay, all of that, pretty cool, not too bad, not too shabby. War comes, right, and devastates him. Here, he writes all this great stuff about Western civilization, and what do? We destroy the world. We kill each other in unimaginable numbers, horrible ways. Gas, machine guns from the air. It's all kicking off, and he's very depressed. On top of which, the accidents of history. At that time, Gabon was a French colony. And since at the time he was born, Alsace was German, not French, was soon to flip-flop, he was considered a German national and interned by the French. And why this is devastating is because he knew the entire hospital collapsed without him. Back to the jungle. Everything he'd built. There's pictures of him in the POW camp pretending to play the organ on a bare table and just, barely holding it together. In fact, Reina, his wife, became so ill at that time that she was never able to return to Africa with him again. So when we came back and rebuilt everything, what strength of character. When he came back and rebuilt everything, he had to leave his family behind. And you would think it's like, all these great people and their families hate them. Not at all. When we met Reina, what's the daughter's name? Anyway, we met the daughter. His family always loved him and thought the world of him, and continued his work. My mom worked for the Schweitzer Center in one of many Schweitzer centers that have been set up all over the world. That was set up by a filmmaker who was, inspired by Schweitzer, and set up a whole environmental center for him, his memory and stuff like that in Massachusetts. And my mom worked there for a while, doing summer camps with kids. There's a Haiti hospital in Haiti, inspired by him. Schweitzer Center and Hospital in Haiti. I've translated correspondence for them. There was something in New York that worked with the UN. So many people have been inspired by him. He corresponded with, Sartre, Einstein, you name it. So he goes back, rebuilds everything, and eventually, he does become known, and he wins the Nobel Prize. And he uses that platform, the money, to continue his work he just stayed grounded in his medical work in Gabon, but the platform he used to advocate against nuclear war. Anyway, I'm sure if we look hard enough, we can find some things, some unenlightened things he might have said about Gabonese people in a frustrated moment working there, or who knows what we can find to fault him with. But why? Why we have so few people to hold up, Why try so hard to bring them down? And when we're doing that, what are we building, right? Who am I to critique Albert Schweitzer, right? And yet for all that, he is very human, I think of that picture of him in the POW camp and his letters and stuff, and he's very human. But he did have obviously incredible skill. He learned things, in every field so quickly. But he did have incredible energy. I think that's the one thing. If I could steal from him, I would steal that energy. So he could just work and work and work, and then, after all day working in the hospital, then, stay up all night writing, brilliant philosophy and stuff like that. Anyway, so that's Albert Schweitzer. Give Reverence for Life a read. Give him, maybe the benefit of the doubt when you're thinking, are there no, old white guys that aren't horrible? Some of them aren't so bad. They tried pretty hard. I've heard him called a benevolent racist. That's fine if you want to call him a benevolent racist. Emphasis on the benevolent. I'm sure today they would call him a white savior complex or something like that. I don't think that's the truth, because he didn't have any of that growing up. He never thought about Africa or anything. That just kind of emerged as the place to be of the most help and impact, or it was the quickest way that he could get to, fill the biggest need that he could with his idea of service that he wanted to do when he turned 30, that vow that he made to himself. The only things when he was growing up was that he was exposed to was the anti-Semitism, and so he was very much more interested in the suffering of Jewish people in Europe, obviously, in Alsace, growing up. So it was a sort of an accident that ended up in Africa. But there you go. There you have it. I hope that you will take inspiration from something from Albert Schweitzer, whether it's animals, medical, music, and build your own Lamborghini.